End quote. Drop her. Now. End quote. Those were the only 3 words I managed to squeeze out of my throat, but they felt like lead weights. And honestly, looking back on that humid Tuesday afternoon, I think my soul had already left my body before the echoes even faded. You see, people tell you that life-changing moments happen in slow motion, like some high-budget flick where the camera pans around while the hero makes a choice. But for me, it was just the smell of freshly cut grass, the sound of my neighbor's sprinkler, and the sight of 2 men in tactical vests putting their hands on my 68-year-old mother. My name's Elias, and I've spent the better part of my adult life in the service, so I've seen some things. I've been in places where the air tastes like copper and the ground feels unstable, but nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepares you for seeing a man who looks like he's playing soldier in a suburban driveway, trying to cuff the woman who used to bake cookies for the entire block. We lived in Silver Creek, a place that used to be the definition of, end quote, quiet luxury, end quote. Or at least that's what the brochures said back in the late 80s when my parents bought the place. It was all oak trees and wraparound porches, a slice of the American dream that stayed frozen in time while the rest of the world went crazy. But lately, that dream had started to feel a lot more like a velvet-lined prison. The rot started with a woman named Brenda Vance. She moved in about 5 years ago, a real estate lawyer with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, the kind of person who counts the blades of grass on your lawn just to make sure they're all the same shade of emerald. She took over the Homeowners Association board like she was running for the Senate, and her whole platform was, end quote, restoring integrity, end quote, which in Silver Creek speak meant, end quote, get rid of the old guard and the messy history, end quote. My mom, Martha, she was the heart of the old guard. She'd been there for 40 years. She knew where the pipes were buried. She knew which neighbors needed a hand with their groceries, and she knew that the HOA was supposed to be a safety net, not a noose. The tension had been building for months, starting with those petty little yellow slips of paper stuck to our mailbox. Violation for the wrong color mulch. Violation for a flower pot that was, end quote, too rustic, end quote. Violation for the wind chimes my dad bought her before he passed away. Mom took it all with a grace that honestly annoyed me. She'd just smile, take photos, and document everything because she knew what Brenda was really after. Brenda wanted her house. She wanted the corner lot for a, end quote, community expansion project, end quote, that looked a lot like a kickback scheme for her husband's construction firm. When Mom decided to run against her for the board presidency, that's when the gloves came off, and the neighborhood started feeling less like a community and more like a surveillance state. On that Tuesday, I was cleaning my service rifle in the living room, just routine maintenance, keeping the hands busy, when I heard the shouting. It wasn't oppos, the usual, end quote, neighborly dispute, end quote, shouting. It was sharp panic, the kind of sound that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I looked through the bay window, and there they were, 2 guys dressed in black, end quote, security, end quote, vests with, end quote, Silver Creek compliance, end quote, patched on the back, looking like they just stepped out of a budget action movie. They had my mother by the upper arms, dragging her toward a blacked-out SUV that was parked crookedly across our driveway. And I didn't into oppos. To even think I didn't into oppos. Process, I just grabbed the magazine, clicked to home, and stepped out onto that porch. End quote. This is a private matter, sir. Step back. End quote. The taller one shouted at me, his hand hovering over a can of pepper spray like he was some kind of marshal in the Old West. He had this smug, jagged little grin, the kind of look a bully gives when he thinks he's holding all the cards, and he told me my mother was being, end quote, detained for persistent noncompliance and public nuisance, end quote, regarding some bogus claim about her hosting an unauthorized yard sale. It was actually just her bringing in a box of old books to donate to the library, but to these guys, it was a felony. I stood there, the rifle leveled but not yet aimed, feeling the heat of the sun on my neck and the cold realization in my gut that these wearing and oppos, real cops. They didn't end oppos, have badges. They didn't end oppos, have the, end quote, look, end quote. They just had the arrogance of men who had been told they were untouchable. My mom was crying, not because she was hurt, but because she was humiliated. 40 years of dignity being dragged across the concrete by a couple of hired goons in a power trip. I told him again, my voice lower this time, vibrating in my chest, to let her go, and that's when a shorter one, a guy with a buzzed head and eyes that looked like they hadn't an oppos, seen a kind thought in a decade, leaned in, He looked right at me, then back at my mom, and he whispered something. It was loud enough for the porch camera to catch later, but in the moment, it felt like a thunderclap. He said, and quote, "Just sign the withdrawal papers, Martha, and we can all go home. Brenda says you're too old for this anyway." End quote. When my mom spit at his feet and told him she wasn't oppos to going anywhere, he didn't oppose to even hesitate. He pulled back his hand and slapped her, a heavy, wet sound that echoed off the brick of our house, sending her glasses flying and leaving a red mark that started to swell instantly. Everything went quiet. You know that sound when a radio station goes dead? That's what the world felt like. I didn't oppose to feel anger. I didn't oppose to feel fear. I just felt the logic of the situation finalize itself. The taller guy saw the look in my eyes and started to reach for something behind his back. Maybe a taser, maybe a sidearm. I didn't oppose to wait to find out. I shouldered the rifle, the stock fitting into my pocket like it belonged there, and I fired. The first 3 rounds hit the one who struck her right in the center of that tactical vest, but those cheap plates didn't oppose to do a damn thing against high-velocity rounds. He crumpled like a discarded rag doll, his grip on my mom and Oppo's arm vanishing as he hit the turf. The second guy, the one who'd been acting like a tough guy just seconds ago, turned into a sprinter. He didn't oppose to try to fight. He didn't oppose to try to help his partner. He just bolted for the SUV, screaming something incoherent about, end quote, not signing up for this, end quote. I tracked him, my breath held in that perfect, empty space between heartbeats, and I took 2 more shots. He went down by the rear tire, skidding across the asphalt, his legs giving out as the reality of the situation finally caught up to his nervous system. I didn't oppose to run. I didn't oppose to panic. I walked down those steps, my boots thudding on the wood, and I went straight to my mom. I pulled her up, wrapped her in an arm that felt like it was made of stone, and I led her back inside the house while the neighborhood began to wake up. Windows were sliding open. People were stepping onto their lawns with their phones out, and in the distance, I could already hear the real sirens, the ones that actually meant something. I sat her down at the kitchen table, handed her a glass of water, and then I walked back to the front door, set my rifle on the porch rail, and waited with my hands open. When the sheriff and Oppo's deputies arrived, it was a circus. They had me in cuffs for about 40 minutes, which I expected, but then the footage started coming in. Not just from my porch, but from 3 different neighbors who had been filming the harassment for weeks. The end quote, Silver Creek compliance end quote. Team turned out to be a couple of disgraced ex-security guards Brenda had hired through a shell company to end quote, pressure end quote, residents into following her new bylaws. When the detectives found the text thread on the surviving guy and Oppo's phone, the one who was now paralyzed from the waist down and singing like a canary, it was all over. Brenda had literally texted them, and quote, make it hurt enough that she quits. No one's going to check the paperwork, and quote. Brenda Vance didn't oppose to even get to finish her term. She was arrested at a HOA brunch 2 days later, charged with conspiracy, aggravated assault, and a laundry list of civil rights violations that's probably going to keep her in a state cell until my mom's house is a historical landmark. The neighborhood changed after that. The HOA was dissolved by a unanimous vote of the survivors. The fences came down, and for the first time in a decade, people actually started talking to each other again without looking over their shoulders. I still think about that day every time I walk out onto the porch. I think about the look on that guy's face before I pulled the trigger, and I wonder if I did the right thing. My mom says I'm a hero. The neighbors say I saved the community from a tyrant. But at the end of the day, I'm just a guy who saw his mother get hit and decided that the law of the land didn't oppose to apply to people who hide behind fake badges and fake authority. But hey, that's just my side of it. I know some people think I went too far, that I should have waited for the police or tried to de-escalate. But when you're standing on your own dirt and someone puts hands on your family, does the end quote, reasonable end quote, option even exist anymore? I want to know what you would have done. Would you have let them take her? Would you have waited for a badge that was 10 minutes away while she was being shoved into a car? Or is there a line in the sand that, once crossed, justifies everything that comes next? Drop a comment. Let's talk about it, because in a world full of Brindis and fake cops, I think we all need to decide where our own line is before someone else draws it for us.